thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted and thrilled to be here. And I'm also thrilled to see so many familiar faces. Michael Flowers, so I know who was instrumental in getting me here, and Adam Troy, and my good buddy here in the front row. We've worked with his firm. He's helped us with a lot of our MBEs, so I know my time is limited, so I don't want to babble on and on. But I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm happy to take questions at the end of this. So, and before I get off the stage, DLZ, who was in the last presentation, is one of our minority businesses. So I'm real happy that they are involved in one of your projects. So I was asked to spend a little time. That's when I can't move around. I'm used to walking around the stage, have to be tethered to the microphone. But I was asked to spend some time talking about who I am first and give my background. So real quick, born and raised in Washington, D.C. I went to Howard University undergrad. I studied finance. Right after graduation, I moved to New York City to work for Manufacturers Hanover Trust, or Manny Hanny. I can tell by your age if you know who Manny Hanny is. I did that for a bit and then went back to the Fuqua School of Business to get my MBA at Duke. Switched careers and went to consumer packaged goods brand management. I worked with some pretty cool brands, as you can see. A lot of mergers and acquisitions and things happened throughout that, so at the end of a few years, I decided to go back to D.C., where a partner and I got together, we put our money together, and we started to invest in row houses in Baltimore. So we would buy them for $5,000 or $10,000, rehab them, put a tenant in, make sure it was positive cash flow, and we would sell that as a turnkey item to somebody who wanted to be a landlord but didn't want to do all the work. So while I was doing that, I got the call from a private equity firm to come to Ohio to run and sell Glory Foods. Glory Foods is a maker of canned greens and vegetables. They're still in the stores today. We grew the company to $65 million, and we sold it. And after that, I hung out my shingle and decided to do some consulting work. So I did strategy consulting work. I developed some strategic plans for a lot of companies and organizations here and around the country. So that is me in a nutshell. And then while I was doing that, I got the call from the board chair at the time of this organization who said, hey, can you come be the interim president for 6 months? I said, I can stand on my head for 6 months, so sure, I'll come do it. 3 years later, I'm before you lovely people, so. All right, so who are we? We are part of the National Minority Supplier Development Council. We've been around since 1972. President Nixon actually wrote into law and established the Minority Business Development Agency, which is still in existence today. It's folded up under the Commerce Department. But this was formed to make sure that we had opportunities for minority-owned businesses. I'll get into this in a second. We have certified almost 12,000 MBEs around the country. We have 23 regional councils, and we have almost 1,500 corporate members. We are a corporate membership-driven organization. You can see here some of my other peers and the areas that they touch and that they cover, but I'm just the president of Ohio. So the Ohio Minority Supplier Development Council, we have 95 corporate members in the state. We've certified almost 400 minority-owned businesses, and we do 4 major events a year, and we do things that are capacity building. So the idea is to make sure that the minority suppliers are ready to do business with our large corporate partners. As many of you know who probably have worked for or currently working for large organizations, it can take a lot to work with a large company with a multi-billion-dollar concern, especially if you're a small company. And quite frankly, if you're doing $100 million, you're still relatively small. So we try to build the skill sets and the capacity of our minority businesses so that they're ready to do business with large corporations. So these are just some. I couldn't fit them all on because there are 95 corporate members, but I'm sure they're names that you recognize. So you can see they represent a large slice of the industry groups around the country and around the state. They're very engaged and very active on our board, and they help us with our connections for minority businesses. So what do we do in a nutshell? Well, we make sure that there's a level playing field. All minority businesses want is an opportunity. This is not a set-aside program. This is not the 8A. You've heard of that. That's not what this is. This is to make sure that minority businesses at least are considered. That's it. They just want a seat at the table. We help get them prepared, and we ask our corporate members to be open to consider them in the pipeline. That's it. So they have to go get the business, right? But we get them prepared, and we ask our corporate members just to be open to that. So how do we do that? Well, we have what we call our 4 pillars. We certify so that our corporate members know that they're dealing with minority-owned, led, operated, and directed companies. We help develop them through a lot of capacity building programs and events to build their skill sets. We act as advocates in the supplier diversity space. And the last thing is that we connect them to our corporate members. So why do we do it? Well, the numbers are huge from an economic standpoint. Those 400 minority businesses generate $16 billion back to the economy of Ohio. That is a huge, huge number for such a small number of businesses. They contribute $1.25 billion in tax revenue and created almost 53,000 jobs. That has a significant impact on the economy of Ohio. And lastly, they've paid out $3.8 billion with the B in salaries and wages. So they are definitely contributors to the state of Ohio. They're not takers, they're definitely makers. So I think that's important. But why would corporations care? That's the social and economic impact, so you get that. But why would corporations care? What's in it for them in terms of the bottom line? Well, more numbers for you. So those corporations that are deemed as world-class from a procurement standpoint, they spend 33% of their dollars with minority suppliers. And why do they do that? Because 99% of the minority suppliers meet or exceed their expectations. And for every dollar spent, they get an additional $3.6 million back. That's a nice return that you can take to the bank and drop to the bottom line. So that was a Hackett study that was done with companies across the country. But I'll give you one better. Procter & Gamble, multi-billion-dollar company, they did a study of their minority suppliers. And what they found is that their diverse suppliers outperform their non-diverse suppliers by 10%. They generate 2 times the share of cash. They're more agile, more nimble, more responsive, and they're more likely to hire other diverse employees. So you see how that all works together in terms of transforming lives and generations? This is real business, real stuff, and it really helps make a difference. So how do we do that? This is just one of the programs that I wanted to mention. We have partnered with the Ohio State University Fisher School of Business to put on the Ascend program. We got J.P. Chase Morgan Foundation to fund it. We've gotten 2 grants totaling $400,000 because OSU is not a cheap institution, so that's where a lot of the money goes. But it's focused on operational excellence. So everybody knows about Six Sigma and all of those techniques. That's what these MBEs are learning in the class so that they can apply it directly. They even go so far as to, we have coaches for the MBEs, so they go to their place of business, and you've heard of the term Gemba, a Gemba walk, right, where you get to, it literally means just go to the site to see what's going on. So Toyota, Honda, a lot of companies like that use these Gemba walks. So they go to the place of business and they spend time with the MBEs understanding what their opportunities are and what their challenges are. So that's what makes us different from a lot of the classes that you can sign up for and take around the country, because it's real practical. So the MBEs have to come forward with an opportunity and with a challenge and a problem, and the coaches help them get to something that's realistic. We have anchor organizations, so Eaton, Honda, Procter & Gamble, Cleveland Clinic are some of our anchor organizations. They have presented to the MBEs, and they walked away completely impressed, and they said, oh my God, this is exactly what minority-owned businesses need to be better suppliers in our workplace. So that's just one of the many, many things that we do. And the cool outgrowth from this is I am taking those, some of those techniques, A3 thinking and DMAIC, and I'm applying that to the nonprofit. Why? Because we're a business nonprofit, and just because you're a nonprofit does not mean you cannot be profitable. So I think we need to employ some of those techniques in the nonprofit space. It's not all just about, saving whales, and I mean, that's cool. I appreciate that part of it. But we respond to businesses, right? We work with business organizations, with people like you. So we need to comport ourselves, I think, in a much more business-like fashion while we are advancing our cause of supplier diversity. So I just wanted to tie this up in terms of transforming lives and generations. This is a real case study. We do what we call Minority Business Input Committee meetings across the state, and they're once a month. We invited Angel Colon, who's on our board at Kroger. He's in supplier diversity. He came out, and this company called Heritage Fare, they're based in Cleveland. It's an African-American owned business. They make spices and sauces, et cetera. They came to the meeting. And they had been in distribution at Kroger, but it was really spotty and really small, and they had only met with their category manager once. So they were kind of floundering as a brand. Well, Angel Colon went back to become an advocate for them. So that's what supplier diversity people do. They act as internal advocates within their corporations. Long story short, he's now in 1,000 stores across the country, Kroger stores across the country. That is life transformational. Think about that. So that's how Glory Foods started out, just one store at a time, and then grew to $65 million. That changes lives. Think about it. His kids and their kids, their lives will never be the same because they had an opportunity. Not a set aside, they had a real opportunity, and it's something of value for the corporation. So that's why I get jazzed. That's why I'm excited about this work. So with that, Ohio makes it happen. Woohoo! Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm happy to take questions. Yes, sir.
I didn't understand the statistics about money dropping to the bottom line by using the suppliers. Can you give more detail? Is that cash to dollar savings compared to other vendors?
Yeah, what you mean in the P&G study or just in general?
I think the P&G study, I believe.
Is it this one?
That one, yeah.
This,
yeah.
Yeah, this stat. The dollar spent. The question was, he wanted me to explain this statistic about the investment and the dollar spent. I have to go back and take a look at the study, but I think the point is that oftentimes you can save a lot of money when you work with minority suppliers. That's not always the case, but because they're more agile, more nimble, more innovative, that is the part that helps your business and helps that drop to the bottom line. And we have Turner Constructions on our board, and Kyle Rooney, some of you may know him. He says, if you're working with a supplier and you've been working with them for more than 20 years, chances are you're paying too much. So bringing in diverse suppliers just helps you relook at your supply chain and your base to say, okay, where can we make some changes? Thanks. Any other questions?
I have a question back here.
Oh, yes.
How do you choose your supplier partners? Do they apply? How do you represent them or help them advocate? How do you choose those suppliers?
How do we choose the suppliers, the minority businesses?
Yes, that is part of the go in. That you said you advocate for this gentleman who went in for Kroger's. How is he chosen, or how do they apply? Are they part of it? Can you explain a little bit that to me, please?
The minority businesses, how do we choose our supplier partners was the question. Our minority businesses, our MBEs, have to apply to be certified. So we take them through a very rigorous process. We look at their tax returns, their operating agreements. We do a site visit because we want to make sure that they are legitimately minority-owned, led, operated, and directed. And and we do turn some down occasionally. There was one guy who owned 51% of the company, but when you really looked at the operating agreement, he wasn't making all the decisions for the organization. So we're real strict about that. That's really important because our corporate partners rely on us to do that due diligence, to make sure that they're dealing with a minority-owned company. And the corporate members, usually what you have is a C-suite who agrees and understands the importance of supplier diversity, and then they put in place a supplier diversity manager or director to lead the initiatives within the company. Does that answer your question? Yes, sir.
The concept of profitability in a nonprofit is good. Explain to us, if you would, what constitutes the income that your nonprofit receives?
Well, we have P&Ls just like everybody else, so we do events. So the sources of revenue, let me break it down that way, how about that? The sources of revenue are corporate memberships, sponsorships for our events, the actual events themselves, they generate money, and the certification fees that the minority business owners pay us. The national organization also takes in dues from their national corporate members, and they pay based on the revenue size, and then we get part of that money. So those are really the 5 streams of income, of revenue. So, thanks.
Tell us about your staff and what, as the head of the Ohio operation, where else do you have penetration in your activities?
Did everybody hear that? Wow. Tell us about your staff. That was a nice, loud question. I appreciate it. We are based here in the Chase Building in Columbus. We do have an office in Cleveland, Ohio, and there are 2 staff members there. One that handles certification for everything really north of Mansfield. And there's a young lady who's there on a grant who also helps with that endeavor. So, and then in Cincinnati, we have office space that was given to us by U.S. Bank for free free, and free is my favorite price, so that's a great thing. So we have that space we can use to do events and meet with MBEs and corporate members.
So, yeah, numbers. You have 10.
Oh, numbers. Oh, yeah. It's 10 people when you add it all up. 5 full-time staff members. The rest are a combination of contract folks, consultants, people paid by grant, part-time workers, et cetera, things like that. But yeah, so it's 10 in total.
So a majority of your activities comes from your members who refer business opportunities to you, and then you go out and explore the.
Correct. Yep. So as a for instance, I got a call from a major corporation, and it's a confidential search. They were looking for a very specific type of an MBE. We had 3 in our database. I called all 3, had a conversation. All the MBEs were doing less than $2 million in sales. It was a $12 to $15 million opportunity. That's a game changer, right? It could also put you out of business, right? If you're small and you take on too much too fast. So my question was, how are you going to handle this if you were to be considered? So based on the responses that I got, I went back to the corporation and said, here's the lead candidate. They spoke very confidently about partnering, and they understand strategic alliances and how that works. So they were able to be put into the RFP. They don't have the business, but at least they're in the RFP, so they have an opportunity to win the business.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any sort of
Yes.
follow-up to that of the previous question is, in evaluating someone as to whether or not they are an MBE, how much do you put limits on the extent to which they can subcontract, have non-MBEs do part of the work?
We don't. No, we don't. As long as the company, again, is at least 51% owned, led, and operated and directed, then how they get their work done is really, that's we don't want to hamstring them. We're just certifying that they are a minority-owned entity. How they get their work done, who they partner with, who they align with, we don't get into the weeds on that. So, did that answer your question? Yes. Yes, sir.
So do you have programs where you target specific industries, because certain industries may be more difficult than others? For example, construction.
Do we target different industries was the question. We don't, but we have some concentrations from our corporate members. So we have a lot in construction, higher ed, finance and banking, and healthcare. So those tend to be the concentrated areas. But I will tell you, just because those are the industries that they're in, they have all kinds of needs. So you'd be surprised, sometimes it could just be putting up lights, on the exterior of a building, or it could be AEP oftentimes looks for people to, knows how to mow the lawns around those, transformer boxes, and you have to have a specialty in that. So the requests that we get are a wide variety, just as varied as our corporate partners. Yes, sir?
You say you're not a set-aside, but could you comment on, do you interact with that piece of the pie at all? I mean, do you advocate for set-asides, or do you get involved with that?
We're not, since we're not involved with the government at all, and that's really the Small Business Administration, the 8A program that they have. So that's not who we are. I'm definitely an advocate because I'm a beneficiary of that. I started in the projects in DC, and my dad was a clerk typist for the Department of Commerce. He had a wife, 3 kids, and a German Shepherd he had to feed. So the 8A program was born, and he decided to take advantage of it, and he created a janitorial and food service business. Well, that moved us out of the projects, got us into a home, and that's what paid for me to go to college. So I'm a big fan of those programs because, again, it transforms lives and generations. I would not be here before you, I believe, were it not for that program. That's not who we are, though. We're looking to develop the capacity of minority-owned businesses so that they can work alongside anyone. And in Ohio, our MBEs range in sales from startup to $1.2 billion with a B. And they're all kinds of sizes. In the country, we have MBEs that are doing $10, $11 billion. They're as large as some corporations, but they're still a minority-owned business. So again, it's not a set-aside. It's just, are you ready to play? Can you get at the table? That's all. Suit up. Don't sit on the bench. Let's put you in the game. At least let's see what you can do. That's the whole idea. Yes. Yes.
What's your greatest challenge?
What's my greatest challenge? It's a nonprofit, so after spending all this time in corporate and running Glory Foods and then coming to a nonprofit, The fundraising piece is forever a challenge. It's really the cash flow. Put it that way. That's really what it is. I've got more outstanding receivables than I should have. So managing the monthly cash flow is a little bit of a challenge. I didn't realize that would happen. So I'm always looking for incremental revenue sources, which is why I'm targeting grants and things like that, so that we don't have to necessarily depend on the whims of when our corporations pay. A lot of you may know that corporations can take 90 to 120 days to pay their invoices, right? Not cool when you're trying to manage the cash flow of a small organization. So that's my biggest challenge. Thanks. Yes?
Could you share a little bit more about the corporations need to engage you to pull in small minority businesses? You know, tying it to the membership, like why do the corporations, I mean, there are wonderful corporations, why do they feel it's important?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the numbers don't lie. I mean, I think we started out with a social economic kind of a message, which is important, right? But once the corporations realize that this really helped their bottom line, this is business. So that's why we separate ourselves out again from the set aside, because this really helps the corporation. And you get fresh new ideas, innovative ideas. So what corporation doesn't want or need that? And I will say, and to piggyback again on your question, again, you have C-suite executives who buy into the idea and the concept of supplier diversity, right? And then you have the supplier diversity person. In the middle, you have a lot of middle management layers. And sometimes they can be, what's the right word? I'm not going to use that phrase. I just you get used to doing things your way, correct? When you've been in an organization, especially if you have risen through the corporate ranks. I've been there. I've been a director in a corporation. So, you've got those two ends that are trying to squeeze the middle and say, hey, consider. Remember, there are lots of minority-owned businesses in this space. And it's not just us when it comes to supplier diversity. It's not just about minority businesses, but supplier diversity is broad. So you have women-owned businesses, you have veteran-owned businesses, et cetera. So, the landscape is very, very, very broad. So I would say that's also, I'll piggyback and add to that, it's also another challenge to make sure that happens. So does that answer your question? Yes, thanks. Yes, sir.
You say you're not involved with cities, government. Should you be involved with government? Those corporations who are members of your board are concerned about the quality of life of the people in the cities in which they're operating. What I'm not aware of, I don't know anybody here is aware of, organizations like yours who work with cities to improve the ability of minority corporate organizations to help improve the quality of life through the corporate environment. You must have quality staff, 10 people. So should you be involved with government?
Well, and I guess to rephrase, so should I be involved with government is the broader question. They are our strategic partners. So I just wanted to make sure I differentiated in the fact that we are a private nonprofit. So a lot of people think that we're a government agency. So I try to make that distinction really clear. Right. Now, but we do work hand in hand with the state of Ohio and with the city of Columbus. Because again, if you see from the economic impact, that's significant. So that's how you transform lives and generations, by putting more money in the coffers so that the city and state can get done what they need to get done. So we do partner with them. We do a lot of joint activities together. We overlap in terms of our minority suppliers. A lot of the ones that we've certified, the city and state have already certified. So we do a lot of things together, but I just wanted to make that distinction. Yes, sir.
Piggybacking on Larry's question a little bit, in one of your early slides, I read that, I can't remember the acronym for the group that Richard Dixon created.
Oh, MBDA. Mm-hmm.
So, and then you got a national organization. How do those all fit together? How do you work together with that department of the Commerce Department?
How do we work together with the Minority Business Development Agency, which is an agency under the Department of Commerce? There are MBDA centers that are established. So some of our councils have MBDA centers as part of their offices, so they get a grant from the Department of Commerce, so they can provide resources and tools and consulting one-on-one with minority-owned businesses. So that's the distinction. We don't have one here in Ohio, but Michigan has one, Florida, I forget some of the other states that have MBDA centers. So that is the connection there.
But as far as you're in Ohio, do you deal with them in DC at all, or?
I'm sorry,
Do you deal with them in Washington or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't directly. On a national level, they do. In fact, Henry Childs, who is now who's taken over for the MBDA, came to our national conference and spoke, and he's done all. So we do connect in that regard. Mm-hmm. Yes. Any other questions?
If you had to view out 5 to 10 years in this whole arena, what do you see?
If I had to go out 5 to 10 years, do I have a crystal ball? That's a broad question, Rick. My hope would be that it becomes more in the baseline, right? So that it's not anything separate and apart. That it is it's part and parcel of who we are as a society, who we are as a culture, and it's not an afterthought. That would be my hope. That people don't, stop thinking of them as, these are those minority businesses over there that need help. No, that's not what this is. There's some very capable firms. You guys are working with DLZ on that engineering project, so there are a lot of very capable minority-owned firms out there. So I would love for it to just be part of the DNA of business. That would be my ideal. Yes, sir.
He opened the door to this. I've been sitting here wondering as I'm listening. Are you building a forward momentum here with this crystal ball? Are you constructing part of that crystal ball so that those companies that you take from being a mom and pop to being a multi-million-dollar concern, are they coming back to your well to resource what they need? Do you go alumni association on them and call them every 15 minutes for money? You know what I mean? Are you building that future so that the crystal ball at least has part of the answer already in it?
Absolutely. And the way we do that is with the companies that are larger, we ask them to establish supplier diversity programs, just like we ask the corporations, so that they come back and also source from those MBEs and also work with them and give them contracts. So we do reach out to them, and a lot of them do give back. A lot of them have reached the level of sponsorship on par with our corporate members because they're just that big. So I hope, is that answering your question in terms of
overall that more often than not they are cooperative, they do want to help you to build other businesses?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, just real quick, there are several businesses that are active with us who do 80-90% of their business with the federal government, but they believe in what we're doing, so that's their give back. So they write checks and they show up and they volunteer and they help out. Absolutely. But a lot of the bigger organizations, like Billy Vickers, anybody know MAI, Modular Assemblies, $1.2 billion out in Dublin. He gave us Red Bank to help build a program. They built a very successful program to help our other minority businesses. He didn't benefit from that personally. He just saw that it was a need, and he underwrote the whole project. So yes, they do a lot, and they do come back and give back. And any other questions? Anything I can address? Wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for your time and attention. Appreciate you being allowing me to be here.
Well, thank you, Jackie, and great presentation. Next week we have Tom Ryland coming from WOSU, so we'll hear more about public radio, so not the corporate side, but we'll hear the public side, public nonprofit side. I guess WOSU, the radio station, so that'll help us touch off the rest of the holiday season here with their presentation. So I hope you all can join us then, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.